Thanks for watching this portion of Garage Logic today on our YouTube channel, and hit the subscribe button if you wouldn't mind. And also thanks to our friends at Everest Men's Health for sponsoring this. Go to everestmenshealth.com today to see if they can help you with better energy and better health. And catch the Garage Logic podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.
The Kim Potter trial began today.
Yeah.
And I'm developing a theory. I think it's not even that novel of an idea that I've noticed. I think it certainly began with the death of George Floyd and the subsequent trial of Derek Chauvin. This Kim Potter trial is not going to be allowed to just be held organically.
No.
It's being taken over by the media.
Yeah.
And not necessarily liberal or conservative media, just by news-gathering institutions.
Right.
Fox News today had 11 pages on this. 11 pages. The name Daunte Wright is on full display across Minneapolis area this week as the community hunkers down once again for the beginning of the trial of ex-police officer Kim Potter. A picture of Wright, who was 20 years old when Potter shot him during a traffic stop in an alleged stun gun firearm mix-up, has been placed under the sculpture of a fist in George Floyd Square. Wright's name is also on the marquee that calls for passersby to demand justice over his killing. Okay, it's a case that is not remotely analogous to George Floyd.
None whatsoever.
The Star Tribune, on its front page today, has, as Potter trial begins, a sense of dread. The trial is being shaped and formed by political attitudes. Mm-hmm. It's not being shaped and formed organically by the rules of justice or law. That hopefully will prevail, of course, in the courtroom. But you already have a mob of people with their minds made up. And in many respects, news-gathering institutions are going to play to that faction of the American society. I don't know why Fox decided to have 11 pages on this, other than clicks. And it's just full of photographs and admonitions and warnings and pictures of George Floyd Square. And yeah, I do know why.
Well, the only thing analogous is white cop kills black male. Mm-hmm. That's the only thing analogous to this.
Just dozens of pictures in this Fox operation. And there's Daunte Wright's picture leaned against the fist that in the middle of that intersection at 38th and Chicago?
Yes.
And there's pictures of all the billboards and the graffiti that was done in favor of George Floyd. And
and we discussed this either it was last week or the week prior. I apologize for not remembering, but I saw over the weekend, I cannot remember what local news outlet it was, but they were speaking with a protester on the street. Mm-hmm. And it was justice for all the usual things you would hear. And he says, we won't be happy unless she's she's convicted of murder. Right. Well, she's not being charged with murder.
No. Right. They're not smart.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. So if a manslaughter conviction comes down and half these people don't even realize she's not even being charged with murder, that's not going to satisfy the mob.
Manslaughter and murder is the same thing in their eyes.
You think so?
I do.
This is leading network newscasts.
Yes.
Driving in today, I listened to the top of the hour CBS radio newscast. It was the second news item in the agenda. It's being taken over by the media.
Out of curiosity, what was the first?
I'm trying to think. It was probably COVID. I don't know. I can't remember. Okay. But it's being taken over and shaped and molded, as I say, by news-gathering institutions that see in this merely a political opportunity to weigh in ways that have become the norm since the Chauvin trial. And did you see where St. Paul, by the way, the courthouse in St. Paul has inherited the trial of the other three cops that were with Chauvin that night? And both Todd Axtell and Mayor Melvin Carter, they don't want it in St. Paul. With some justification.
Why did
they don't want it in St. Paul because the building is completely different geographically and topographically from. There's no room. You just get out of your car in the street, and there's the front door.
Why did
Why
decide?
did it get bounced over?
That's a good question.
Well, it's not farther far enough
Further is in
away.
addition to farther is time.
It's not far enough away to make any difference
No, I
as far as
understand
finding a jury pool.
Yeah, I understand.
Is it because the timeline with this particular trial?
I think it could be. Yeah.
Because the thing I was wondering this morning reading about this is, obviously the four of us are all worried about civil unrest. Does it help given the time of the year that this trial is taking place?
Yes.
Yeah, Joe's a big believer in that.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
It's a lot easier to throw bricks when it's warm in May and June than it is in.
Yeah, I'm sure
December
it'll
and
keep some
January.
people off the streets. I would tend to disagree with you on this being a political thing for news gathering institutions, and I would say it's solely based on sales. But if you examine today's piece in the Star Tribune closely, there is no mention of the young man breaking free and getting back into his car and trying to flee the scene. And the lack of that mention proves to me that you're correct, that this is political.
Well, what's being sold to the public, and again, I understand why it's done for. It's not ethical in my estimation. The seeds of civil unrest are being planted. Mm-hmm. They're being foreshadowed. Oh, what's the word I want? They're being predicted. Mm-hmm. Well, if you hector the public enough about the anticipation of civil unrest, there'll probably be civil unrest.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I say this is not being allowed to be held organically and naturally. It's being held now shrouded by the idea that civil unrest must be a part of this. Civil unrest must be a part of this. While that isn't necessarily true, although I'm being naive, a white police officer shoots and kills a black man. Yes, civil unrest is not an unreasonable thing to forecast, but it's being packaged and sold that way. That we should, and the entire world once again is focused on downtown Minneapolis, just as they were last May, or May of 2021. No, May of 2020.
2020,
May
yes.
of 2020. Yeah. Or in June, and whenever the
The last
Chauvin
2.5
trial was.
years has been kind of a blur, I'll be honest.
So, opening statements today, and the prosecutor was very harsh in her remarks, and I haven't not yet caught up to the remarks of Potter's attorneys, both quite veterans of defense counseling, and I'm sure they're not going to let it escape that this young man tried to flee.
Yeah, I did notice some of their opening statements. They concerned mostly her family and that sort of thing, trying to humanize her. It appeared from what I saw. I haven't seen the whole thing, but the part I saw.
Well, I just don't believe she got up that day and intended to kill anybody.
Right.
I just don't believe that. That's not plausible, and I don't believe it. And but again, in a rational, sane world, that would carry a great deal of weight. That sentiment, that emotion would be held true to the heart by many people. I don't think there's anyone with a mob-like mentality who's going to stop to think, wait a minute, I don't think she got up intending to kill a black guy. They're only seeing white cop kills black guy. Mm-hmm. That's all that's being seen. And
that's the way that certain media is portraying this.
right. I don't think the Star Tribune is doing a good job. I just don't. I mean, the headline, as Potter trial begins, a sense of dread. What is the dread? What is the dread emanating from? That he'd be found, that she'd be found innocent? Is that the dread?
What I took away from it was a sense of dread that the protests and the clashes and what they like to call civil unrest is going to happen again up in BC.
Not to apologize for the Star Tribune, but is the sense of dread meaning here we go again? Like the residents have to put up with?
Yeah, that's what is
Yeah,
mentioned throughout the piece.
Yeah.
That's the gist of the story, basically, the residents who live in that area.
Is here we go again?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there doesn't have to be a sense of dread if it was a sane, rational world.
But it's not.
You have a trial, and you present evidence, and a jury takes it under advisement, and you have a decision. That isn't good enough anymore.
Nope.
It's good enough in many cases. It's not good enough with this dynamic. With a white police officer and a young black man who would be alive today if he merely obeyed what was being asked of him.
And so, in some cases, too, there's quite literally nothing that will satisfy some of these people.
That's why there's a sense of dread, I guess.
Yeah.
Does this sense of dread come from the fact that this trial might exonerate her?
I said that. I said, what's the dread? They fear that she's innocent, but the dread seems to be more expressed, as you pointed out,
Well,
by the residents of Brooklyn Center.
I think it's both, Joe. I obviously wasn't listening closely enough to you. I think you're right that they dread that she'll be exonerated, and then the protests and the unrest will happen.
Right.
And I think the fact that they never mentioned the fact that he was trying to flee, I think that fuels the fire. It
And by the
feeds
way-
the beast.
By the way, Kenny, not listening closely, that's my job. Okay, not yours.
What now?
Not listening closely is Reaver's job, not your job.
Huh? How's that hook taste?